early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
Let's begin our business of shaping policy for today by looking at the highlights and the takeaway from the 16th U.S. African Summit, Business Summit taking place in the U.S. What will be the impact of this for the continent as global leaders and African leaders are gathering together to shatter the course for the world economy? What are some of these highlights and what will be the latest or the development for Africa as a continent, and what are the expectations from African leaders as they also gather at the summit? To shed more light on this, we're being joined by a developmental economist. We're being joined by Paul Frimpong, who joins us all the way from Ghana. Paul, glad to have you join us on Early Extinct this morning.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great, glad to have you join us this morning.
Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, I would like you to, for a start, give us a background to the significance and importance of this summit as world leaders are gathering together, most importantly, African leaders, for the 16th edition of the U.S. African Business Summit. Talk to us about the significance of this summit and some of the highlights of the submissions from the world leaders.
Yes, thank you for having me. The U.S. Africa Business Summit, as you mentioned, I think it's happening in Dallas in the U.S. And this is an annual platform that has been created to bring the business community, policymakers, government officials from Africa, and then, of course, from the U.S. to dialogue, to exchange ideas, and to forge a partnership that is, instituted to the benefit of both regions. And so I think the last 2 years they did the first one. The last 2 years they did it in Morocco, and last year they did it in Botswana, and now this year they're back in the United States. Of course, everybody can appreciate the fact that there's a strong relationship between the U.S. and African countries in whichever way and form that you can take it. And so this is the part that brings the business side, business community together, because remember, we have the U.S. African Leaders Summit, that at that level, they bring the political leaders together. I think the last one was held in December 2022 in Washington, D.C. Even U.S. President Joe Biden himself was there to deliver speeches and reiterate U.S. commitment to African development agenda. It also attracts some presidents and high-level ministers from African countries. So that's the U.S. African Leaders Summit. That's a political level. And then you have the U.S. Africa Business Summit, which is a business community, a corporate community. Because as we know, when the political class sets up the policies and the programs, it has to be implemented. And the vehicle for implementation is usually through the people-to-people exchange, through the business-to-business exchanges. When U.S. capital move from the U.S. to Africa, when the African opportunity meets the U.S. capital, that is when all the political conversation can actually be realized. So I believe that it's very significant that we get stakeholders, especially in the corporate and the business world, together to exchange ideas, because they are the ones on the ground. The political class can make their policies, bring out the various laws and regulations regarding trade and tariffs and all of that. But it is the business community, the corporate community that are actually at the forefront of the implementation or taking advantage of some of these opportunities that are emanating from the political class. So I believe that it's very significant as African businesses and policymakers continue to engage the world's number one economy. And no one can downplay the fact that U.S. is playing a very key role in the African development journey. So I believe that such dialogue, such platform is very significant in this respect, especially as a continent, as we have rolled out our own development journeys and plans and programs. I believe we can delve deeper into that, from the AFTA to the Agenda 2033 to all the other regional breakdowns in terms of the ECOWAS level, what the ECOWAS region is trying to do, the East African community, the Southern African development community. All of these regions, they have their own development journey, and they have embedded in that the kind of role that the business community or the corporate world can play. So I believe that it's a very significant platform, and hopefully these businesses. So the difference between the U.S. Africa Business Summit and the U.S. African Leaders Summit is that the actions is actually seen at the U.S. Africa Business Summit, because that is what I said earlier. The business community are the one that are implementing all the policies and the programs has been enacted by the political class.
All right, Frimpong, good to see you after such a long time. It's been a long time since you were on an exchange.
Yeah, indeed. It's been a while. Thank you for having me back. Yeah.
Right. You've talked about opportunity, African opportunity meeting U.S. capital. And since this is a corporate meeting, more like that, it's going to be a B2B interaction mostly. But looking at African opportunity meeting U.S. capital, and the U.S. is interested in doing business with Africa, what are those opportunities that Africa has that it can offer to the U.S. or will be an advantage for the U.S.? And how should Africa offer these opportunities?
Well, I think the first part is that everyone understands when you track development around the world and you talk about risk and returns, definitely Africa offers the best in this scenario, because we can all appreciate the fact that we are dealing with a lot of developmental challenges in every major sector of the African continent. In any country on the continent, you're going to find challenges in those sectors, and of course that means that there are opportunities. And so it's a fact that indeed the returns on investment in the African continent is actually higher than any part of the world. So I cannot even begin to even mention a specific sector or area. Almost every major sector of the continent of Africa, there are massive opportunities, on top opportunities, and they know this. And of course, when you track even the actions of other development partners in respect of the attitude towards China, now, trust me, it's not just the US that has to make sure their capital reaches opportunities in Africa. We have a strong interest from the Middle East in recent times. Countries like the UAE, the Qatar, the Saudi, they are massively investing hugely in the African continent because they see the opportunities that are here. I mean, pick about India. India is also massively investing, of course, our very own China. We all know the history between Africa and China in recent years and decades. We've seen that Africa is a place of doing business, not as a place of pity, where you just donate some money to support some malaria program or what have you. It is a place of doing business. If you put money here, you're going to get results. You're going to get massive returns. And of course, in doing so, you're also creating opportunities. And that's what we are looking for as a continent, that we are offering you a platform and a region where you can invest and make returns. And at the same time, we leverage on that to develop our own country. So the classical case is that of China, as we saw in 2000, when China launched its own forum, China-Africa Cooperation, which is actually happening this year as well. Obviously, they have not turned back. They are actively pushing, encouraging their businesses to keep investing in the continent of Africa, and they are coming in all shape. In fact, you can pick any major sector in Africa, and you're going to find significant China footprint in these sectors, investing massive. So I believe that is what we are offering the world, not just to the US, to everyone that is interested in investing in the continent. Now, about our approach, of course, I mean, we are talking about a continent 54, 55, small, countries, trying to deal with major powers like the US, like China, we're about 1.4 billion, like India, about 1.4 billion, but the Saudi with all their war chest of money and all of that. It becomes sometimes very tricky. So I believe the approach has to be very collective in nature. So collectively, we are talking about either at the regional level in terms of the regional blocks that we have, or even at the continental level, as we already have. Now we have a major program at the continental level for the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, which is what we've set ourselves for as a continent, that indeed, even among ourselves, this is how we want to do business. We want to improve our way of doing business among ourselves. And therefore, we are hoping to leverage or anchor around this after to ensure that the engagement of countries with major development partners like the US or any other country actually are in line with the core mission and the vision of what we have as the after. So I believe that approach is still very valid, because as I said, if you pick a small country like Botswana, which is about 1.2 or 2 million people, dealing with the US population about 350 million people. You can imagine, look at the US is the largest economy in the world, number one economy in the world as it stands now. And therefore, there can be some level of discontent in terms of the kind of position you can take against the US when you are negotiating. So I believe that we have to have that kind of view. Even the US, as we're talking about, they have developed since May 2000. I think it's the 24th year now that the US launched what they call the African Growth and Opportunity Act, the AGWA, which was launched in May 2000, 24 years now. So the US even is dealing with the African continent from a collective point that everything regarding trade and tariffs and access to the US market for certain produce and certain countries to the US market from the African countries is going to go through what they call the AGWA. So they've enacted a whole law that they are using to engage countries across the continent. So it means that it's very significant that we approach such a power, such a major market in a collective way, because individually, I believe that the countries are too small in any way to make any significant impact. So I believe that from that point, whether the regional blocks or from the African continental front, as we actually champion and now happily and gladly we are on our path of really getting our way around the AFTA and everything, payment systems and all of that. I believe that that approach will be very key for us in engaging and trying to get the best deals for the African continent.
All right. At this kind of sensitive business summit where you have world leaders, African leaders gathering together, I would like to know, as an expert who has been covering this kind of summit, what are your expectations and what are the critical issues you would expect to be discussed at this kind of meeting? Issues that are very peculiar to Africa that should be on the table for discussion.
Yeah, I believe that one first thing is that I think the African voice must be heard, that we mean business. That message might be sent, very much well, and it might be sent in a way that we are not trying to beg anyone to invest in our market, in our region, but we are presenting something that we believe is of value to them. That is a very strong message that we need to send, that we are not just here only because we want the US to invest. We are here because you are presenting opportunities that we believe cannot be found in any part of the world. That's a very strong message that I believe can really send a signal, not just to the US, but to all other development partners that are looking to this kind of platform that we have. Again, we need to also relook at some of the previous engagements, especially even when, of course, this is a business corporate level kind of engagement, but you still have the government side. The US government is truly very much interested in this kind of platform. We have some of the US leaders that are always, taking interest in the U.S. Africa Business Summit because they believe that this platform moves the engagement between the two regions. So on the political front, I believe that they must walk the talk as well. We must begin to see that from the business class, these are the challenges that they believe they are facing, and therefore they present to the US, and the US must take, a leadership role in ensuring that they are implementing some of these concerns from the African business community. I think that is very key. And geopolitically too, this, we all know how the business, corporate connect to geopolitics as well, that we have to send a strong message that the African continent is not going to be a pawn in any chess game between any superpowers that are trying to wrestle. We are here and we mean business. The priority of businesses on the continent, together with the government, is to create opportunity for the African people, that we want development, want to transform our economies. We are not interested in any power play. We are here presenting what we believe you cannot find in any part of the world. Therefore, we mean business. So that message also has to be sent clear to the US that this is what we are looking for. We've all seen the kind of challenges that many economies on the African continent faces. I mean, even my country, Ghana, we are now on an IMF program, a 3-year IMF program, which we entered into last year or so. And we had to go to the IMF because we were struggling economically. If we are able to put together our economy well, I believe we will not be in that position. So we just want to send a strong signal that we mean business, we want to transform our economies, and we are presenting opportunities for them to invest. And therefore, that has to be the way. We are not in a pitiful position that we want to beg for any handout or anything of that sort. We are doing business. We open our economies for them to come and invest in. And as they're investing, we also know we are well positioned to also invest. And of course, the reverse is also the case. We have also African capital that also wants to take up opportunity in the US. There has to be a win-win platform for that exchange to happen. For the people to people, in any case, people are always on the move, and business are always on the move, trying to look for opportunities. So that is already happening. But just to ensure that the regulations are fit, the regulations are well positioned to help both sides, I believe that is what. But the strong message that I believe must be sent is that Africa means business. We are open for business. We are open for investment, and that we are presenting opportunities to the U.S. Business community and to their government as well.
All right, looking at sectors, the summit focuses on sectors such as agriculture, energy infrastructure, and others. Now, what specific announcements are you looking forward to regarding initiatives and maybe funding at the summit? For example, the 2022 summit may have led to announcements of U.S. support for development of digital infrastructure for Africa. So at this ongoing summit where the theme is sustainable success, what are you looking forward to regarding announcements, policy announcements?
Yeah, I think one of the key priorities, in terms of, unlocking the kind of the African development journey that we want, you cannot miss out on the energy sector. Of course, the theme itself is partnership towards sustainable development, which means that we are talking about we're going to link it up to the climate-related issues that we are having on the continent, the food security, the drought-related issues, and of course energy. Because now a lot of conversation about energy transition, renewable energy investment, and whatever, and we all understand and trust, and we know that the U.S. is well positioned with the right technology, with the right financial capacity and the expertise and technical insight to help the region in terms of what we can do to secure the future of the continent in terms of energy, in terms of the climate-related issues. So I believe that that's going to be one of the key areas that we need to look at. Even agriculture, there's a lot going on in the agriculture sector that has got to do with the climate, situation that we face on the continent. So for me, I think it is going to be one of the key areas that we should look out for. That there should be some good pronouncement, in terms of the U.S. side, and they always have a way of doing it, because the capital that is in the private hands, of course, moves with the U.S. policy from the political class. So I believe that there can be that kind of commitment as well from the U.S. in terms of helping the African, the energy deficit that we have, whilst we are trying to bridge the energy deficit gap. We're also trying to make sure that the energy sources that we actually having are going to be sustainable in that respect. So we are thinking about renewable energy. There are a lot of corporate entities, there are a lot of opportunities in the African region when it comes to the renewable energy space. And I believe that the U.S. can play a major part in that regard. Of course, also again on climate-related issues, where a lot of the region is being hurt very much in terms of the climate-related issues, the drought, which also affect the food security in some parts of the continent. So these are critical areas that I believe that the U.S. can play a major role. And so I'm expecting some pronouncement in the agriculture sector, linking out to the climate change and of course the energy security that we are trying to battle with as a continent.
All right. Now, what would you expect from African leaders who will be gathering at this forum, as the forum will be, or the summit will be wrapping up today? What are your expectations from African leaders as regards setting the pace for the development in the continent? You're aware that African doing businesses within itself might also be a challenging issue over the years. What would you expect at this kind of summit from these African leaders to change the narrative for the continent?
I believe that, gone were the days that the leaders of the African continent goes to this platform and it's more of they are speaking from something of the future, that we are planning to do this. And therefore, when we're able to do that, we hope that we can do more business with you. and therefore individual countries are just there to present what they have. They're still doing it at this U.S. Africa Business Summit, of course, where they are bringing their own country level development, opportunities mostly through in the U.S. Africa Business Summit, mostly through their investment promotion authorities that they have. So whether it's Ghana Investment Promotion Council, whether it's the Namibia Investment Development Board, and what have you, these are the IPAs, investment promotion agencies. They are at this summit level, they are the key drivers of trying to present what the opportunities are in their respective countries to the U.S. investors and the U.S. public, which is understandable because that's their mandate. But now, the African leaders who are participating in such a summit now have something that is backing them to speak as a collective front, not just as a single country. And again, we are trying to present the Africa, and the only way to present Africa to really maximize the kind of opportunity that we are seeking from the US is when we present Africa as a single market of 1.4 billion people. That this is the market access that we are talking about, that in almost all countries, you're going to find multiple opportunities that you can invest in. So now my thinking is that the approach is that you're going to be speaking mostly from the point of view of the African, own development, plans that we have, whether through the Agenda 2023 of what we're thinking to achieve as a continent, or through the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, where we are saying that we now have a single market of 1.4 billion. Therefore, even if I invest in Nigeria or Ghana or Morocco or Tunisia, you're going to go, if you go to the AFTA system, you have access to all the 1.4 billion markets, access to the 1.4 billion market. So I believe that this is going to be the key point from the African leaders attending this summit, that they believe that they have something backing them now, not that they are speaking into abstract about what the continent is trying to do and trying to achieve. Now we have what we said we are doing, which is strongly in the business sense. The AFTA fits the because we're talking about trade, and this summit is about trade and doing business across the two regions. And we have what we call the AFTA. The US have what they call the AGOA, the African Growth Opportunity Act. So the two has to marry and find the synergies where we believe that you are bringing your AGOA, we are bringing the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How do we merge? And obviously, when you read the two documents in terms of trying to understand what they are trying to achieve, both of them are trying to boost the kind of trade and business relations, investment relations between the two regions. So they are more like complementary, just that some regulations are peculiar because the US has its own internal regulations on how they want to relate to the region. But in the nutshell, both of them are aiming to boost the trade and investment relation between the regions, and the business community, the corporate community are the drivers of this trade and boosting the trade and creating opportunity for businesses, entrepreneurs, and capital and investors from both regions. So that should be the approach. I'm expecting that they will speak from that continental front, that as a continent, we set ourselves up 1.4 billion. You can get access to the market even if you come to my country, Botswana, which is just about 2 million, or you come to my country, which is Ghana, about 35 million people, or Nigeria or Morocco, you can still get access to this market because we have set up these rules and regulations to facilitate that.
All right, talking about AGOA in respects to trade facilitation. Now, the AGOA arrangement is supposed to provide duty-free export for African products into the U.S. markets, but there are challenges with quota limitations and product eligibility. Now, as this summit is ongoing, should that be discussed? The issue of quota limitation and then, of course, product eligibility. Because when you look at the U.S. access to African markets is somewhat unlimited.
I agree with you. I think it has to be discussed, obviously, because again, when the AGOA was set up in May 2000, which is about 24 years ago, and the last time it was reviewed was in 2015, I believe. That was when the AGOA was reviewed and re-extended to, I think, 2030 or so. Now, the point is that by the time the AGOA was instituted, of course, most countries on the continent were not at the level they are now in terms of their development journey. So obviously, it has to be made known that indeed we have new challenges as a continent or new development as a continent. So obviously there must be issues if there are concerns in terms of quota, in terms of product quality, the standardization that the US is setting for African products to access the market, because there's no point having a regulation like AGOA saying that I'm opening up my market to you to access the market free, duty-free, quota-free, access to these products lines from these regions to the US market, and still raising certain standard that excludes the access to this same product lines that you've given the quota free and duty free. So I believe we cannot have that. That's going to be a conflict, right? So that has to be discussed. Any challenges in that space must be discussed. This is the platform to do so, because the people at the forefront implementing the AGOA regulations are the business community, the corporate community. So they are at the forefront of implementing the AGOA. They are the direct beneficiaries of the AGOA program, because if I'm a business owner and I want to deal with the US, I have to pick the AGOA, understand the AGOA, and believe that, okay, with what I'm doing, I can leverage on the AGOA to actually access the US market, which is a huge market anyway, which excess, capital for you to tap into. And if there are restrictions on that same AGOA, then there has to be discussed and removed. Again, the second point here is that I think which might be discussed, passionately, because we are seeing a situation where the AGOA has been used by the US as a political tool to sort of squeeze or turn the hands of some countries on the continent of Africa, which cannot be the case, because we are looking at a continent that is presenting opportunities for investment. And we all agree that you set up AGOA to get access to market to the US, and the US also get access to the African market. It cannot become a political tool to be used to kind of turn around on some countries in the continent. In fact, in recent times, during the BRICS, the BRICS summit in South Africa last year in August, I think, when there was the BRICS summit in South Africa, where there were conversations about the Russian president Vladimir Putin, whether to attend the summit in South Africa or not, and South Africa's position of they even applied to the ICC to make sure that they can exempt themselves from the rules and the regulations that binds them, that binds them to arrest Putin if he lands in South Africa. And you all know the relation between South Africa and China and Russia and all of it, because they are all part of the BRICS bloc, founding members of the BRICS. So therefore, there was that kind of contention because US position is that Putin is a war criminal, and any country that is part of a treaty, when Putin arrives in your country, you should arrest that Putin and send Putin to the international, the ICC. And South Africa was conflicting with that. And even that, so the US AGOA was supposed to be held in South Africa last year. They nearly took AGOA away from South Africa because they believe, and this is the classical case of political manipulation, right? Because you set up a rules and regulation for your engagement with African countries. At the same time, you're using that as a tool to squeeze them, to turn them around, to use that as a leverage to get what you want from them. That conveniences you because you know that they are desperate to do business. I believe that must also be discussed passionately, that we cannot be allowed that AGOA will be used as a political tool to battle your fight with other countries that we are not interested in. South Africa has no interest in Russia, to fight with Russia. You have interest in having war with Russia or having dispute with Russia. That is your classical case. Deal with Russia as you deem fit, but not to use me as a conduit to fight your battle. And I think that must be a clear case to be discussed, because there's no way African countries are going to use the AFTA as a political tool, that because of AFTA, if you're having an issue with this country that we do not like, we're going to squeeze you to ensure that you turn on our side. That cannot be. We must have a fair playing field, that this is purely business. You have African countries, you're engaging with them. Therefore, you cannot pick and choose. There are a lot of countries on the continent of Africa that US have used AGOA as a threat. In Zambia, in Zimbabwe, U.S. have sanctioned them through the AGOA, that we are removing from AGOA because you've said this against the U.S. government because you are taking side with this country against the U.S. Wishes. Those are critical issues that we need to discuss. So it's not just about some of these products and tariff quota and the standard too high for African produce to get access to the African, but politically it's also a very key point to be made that we cannot use AGOA. U.S. cannot continue to use AGOA as a political tool to fight, any geopolitical war that they are facing. I think that point is very important, and we must deal with that going forward.
All right, still on developing issues on AGOA, it is not enough to talk about the challenges or the perception on the other side, because the essence of this act is to ensure that the American market is open to about 35 African countries. Would you say that these African countries have maximized this opportunity, and if they need to maximize it, what should be the action plans on the part of these African nations, about 35 of them?
I think that there's more room for improvement. I believe that the AGOA has shown its relevance. I'm sure that is why it's still in existence. Even though it's a U.S. initiative, of course, I'm sure there are broader consultations with the African regions through the governments, through various agencies and institutions on the continent of Africa to ensure that AGOA stays relevant. And I'm sure the numbers, the commitments from the African region, the commitment from the U.S. in the past 24 years since the institutionalization of the AGOA has shown that it is a very prudent channel to improve U.S.-Africa trade relations, and irrespective of the challenges as we've enumerated earlier, there are still gains that can be touched or that can be seen. And I believe that there could be a number of testimonies from the African region where businesses are actually leveraging on the AGOA to access the U.S. market, to transform their businesses. The same way, we will be seeing a lot of U.S. businesses and investors that can also state on authority that it is through AGOA that they are doing some number of investments on the African continent. I think it's an ongoing dialogue. There's going to be ongoing discussions. The world is changing, and Africa is getting dynamic by the day. There'll be new opportunities, there'll be new challenges on the African continent at various countries' levels. And all of that must box into the kind of engagement that we're having, not just with the US, but with every other major country. And if the AGOA loses its significance, of course, there must be a new channel, a new platform to engage. And it's always very important that there's always that gateway of engagement between regions, because it cannot do anything haphazardly. It has to be coordinated, well coordinated at the institutional level. Structures must be put in place, regulations must be put in place so that everyone engaging in that kind of space will understand that these are the limitations that I have, these are the rules and regulations that I have to engage with in order to deal with the US, irrespective of the challenge that I'm facing, and also try to make your voices heard and known that indeed we have to do better in this space. And of course, as I said earlier, 24 years ago, AGOA, it cannot be, and I'm sure it's not operating as it started in 2000. As I said, the last review was done in 2015, and they found it sustainable to engage. I believe that the dynamics of our world could also, alter the ways of the AGOA to ensure that that there's more inclusivity in terms of even the number of countries that are interested in joining. Of course, this is applying to join the AGOA is at the prerogative of the U.S. government. They decide which country they want to accept into AGOA or not. So again, it's more of the political side in the beginning, but of course, if your country gets accepted, you have to take advantage of it and ensure that you maximize it to the highest level. But then again, I believe that we still have to speak the continental voice, that this is what we are presented. This is what the continent of Africa we've been hoping for, that we are creating a single market of 1.4 billion people, that you can leverage on access to one country to get access to the entire African market. I think that is going to be a very key point to be made. And I'm hoping that there will be more room for improvement in setting the standards, which of course limits, as we said earlier, access to the US market in one way or the other. But again, For us as a continent, we believe that we're open for business, not just to the US, but to everyone that is looking to invest in the continent of Africa.
Now, beyond the summit, beyond discussions held and agreements reached, so what measures should be employed to ensure that agreements reached, announcements, and even investments promised should, not just investment, funds promised should materialize beyond just talking at the summit? Let's talk about accountability.
Yeah, I believe that can only be achieved from the political will. In this case, obviously, even going back to the U.S. African Leaders Summit, I mean, that was people, a lot of participants, a lot of the feedback was a skepticism about the U.S. commitment, really real commitment to the African region. Because up until that point, there's been a lot of rhetoric, and most people that were there in Washington, D.C. felt that it was more of a reaction to what China is doing on the African continent. That is why U.S. is now, more like awake now. Okay, hey guys, let's wake up. We have almost lost the African continent. Let's wake up because China is here. And they mentioned how many times China was mentioned during the U.S. Africa Leaders Summit, right, in Washington, D.C. In December 2022. And this was the first U.S. Africa Leaders Summit was held in 2008, all right? And the second was held in 2022. So you can imagine what has actually prompted the U.S.'s interest in trying to host such a platform. And so the pronouncement that came from that summit was about the commitment about $55 billion US in investment. The US government said they promised that they're going to marshal all their private capital in terms of their private businesses and encourage them, give them some incentive to move to Africa to invest and all that. But the feedback was that this sound more rhetoric and something that they're used to or heard before. And so they demanded that we have to see action, right, in Africa. In fact, at the summit, it was mentioned that leading to 2023, the US President Joe Biden will visit the African continent. But as we speak now, we are in May 2024, and that has not happened. And so, people begin to question whether there's that political, if US is truly interested in taking Africa as a development partner, as a partner in doing business and investing in. So I'll not be surprised if this call again comes out of this summit, that there must be actions. This rhetoric, this commitment, this pronouncement must be backed by action, that we should see real investment, real capital moving, real businesses, and all the challenges being raised by the African business community and the African government. We want to see it, implemented. I believe that's really, and that can only come from political will, because even the US, even though it's a private sector led, their model is different from that of China, which is more like state led. Still, the businesses move with the support of the government of the US, because they lay down the rules and regulations for the business communities to move. So it always has to come back to the political will from the US and the African side, that these are the outcomes, these are the key issues that we raise, these are the key commitments that we're all making at the US Africa Business Summit, that going forward after the end of this summit, these are the things we would love to see implemented. And for the business community, for them, they will walk the talk. Once they know that this challenge has been erased, they will move, they will do business, and we will see the trade numbers in terms of growth, in terms of trade engagement, the business engagement will go up. Because again, as I said, they are the real implementers of these comments. So the political will, we cannot emphasize it enough, that it is very critical at this point that we can get the political will. The commitment must follow, and not just rhetoric as we've seen in the past.
All right, interesting. Now, apart from the African continent, strengthening its tie or economic ties with the US, there's this argument that it's also important for Africa to be able to trade among themselves, a situation whereby Africa will see itself as priority when it comes to maximizing the economic values in the continent. And there are two things that have been projected will facilitate this, and I would like you to react to them. The first on the list is the issue of common currency, which arguably has been of concern over the years, and also the issue of visa-free policy. Kenya and some other countries have been at the forefront of implementing this, while some countries are also dragging their feet as regards the issue of this free visa policy. I'd like you to speak to these issues, what impact will make as regards the continent and for it to facilitate trades among itself.
So we cannot emphasize it enough that the African continent, about 1.4 billion people, is the least, is the region with the least trade among its member countries. We model the Africa continent after we have the EU, the European Union model, which is very significant as we all know how Europe it looks like. Europe is like one country, and that model is what excites Africa, that we want to have the same model as a continent, and we cannot achieve our grand programs and policies in terms of the Agenda 2063, the Africa Continental Free Area, if there's restrictions on the movement of people. People to people exchanges is the icing, is the icebreaker of anything that we want to do to create a single market as a continent. So it cannot be emphasized enough that indeed we need to look into our travel restrictions, in terms of the visa, regime that we have on the continent. That has to be a thing of the past. We cannot continue to talk about, improving the trade between member countries, that we should encourage Ghana to trade with Nigeria, to trade with Morocco, to trade with South Africa, Nigeria to trade with South Africa and any other country on the continent, when there are restrictions on the movement of people. When people move, businesses move, trade increases, trade happens, and then you will see a continent that is indeed integrated as one. And that has been the vision and the mission for the African continent since the first country on the continent of Africa gained independence in 1957, which is Ghana. That we have to, that's the essence, in fact, the whole essence of a whole institution that we call the OAU, now the African Union, that their mandate is to ensure that indeed we have an Africa that is connected in every level, that it should be easier for me to move from here to another country. In fact, and ironically, we think of in a defeatist, manner, more like a zero-sum game kind of approach. That's what some countries do when they think about, removing visa restriction for other countries on the continent of Africa. Why would you think that people would just leave their country and just travel and come and swamp your country? Nobody's going to do that. In fact, in last year in November, for a long time now, finally, Ghana was able to secure a visa-free arrangement with South Africa. And trust me, I don't think we have 2 million, 3 million Ghanaians who have lined up and trotted to South Africa. That's not happening. Why would they do that? When they find opportunity to do something, then they will move. And that is going to improve the trade relation between Ghana and South Africa. I am here, there's visa free between us and South Africa. There's no way I'm saying I'm going to just move to South Africa, just go there and do one. I'm in Ghana. So the thinking that some countries will be disadvantaged when they remove their visa restriction, I think it's far from right. And the classical case, as I said, about the EU, the European Union, the countries in Europe are not the same. They're not on the same side. You can't compare Germany to a country like Luxembourg or to Finland or any of that. There's a huge difference between Germany and Finland, but they have visa-free access to all countries in Europe. Different levels in terms of population, different levels in terms of economic size, in terms of GDP growth and their role in the world and how attractive they are to attract people to come to their country, but they still allow that to flow. And at some point, yes, you're going to find that discrepancy in terms of people moving, but I think over time it's going to normalize. Everybody's going to stay in their country and they only move when the need arises. In fact, there could be a lot of skills in Sudan that can help unlock some opportunities in Ghana, but we never know because we are not allowed Sudanese to come to Ghana without having to get a visa. So it cannot be that because you're a major country, a major economy, therefore you believe that when you open up your country, you're going to get all countries, all citizens of the African country, come into your country, destroy your country, to take over your economy and whatever. I think that is not a way to go. So there must be that kind of commitment from the African political leader. Indeed, it is for the collective interest of our group that we remove all visa restrictions for every country on the continent, that we are creating a single market, and traveling people-to-people movement cannot be taken out of it. If you do that, then we are just defeating ourselves in terms of trying to achieve the objective for the Africa continental free trade area. Currency is a major thing that we also need to discuss. Of course, as you mentioned, that we cannot trade among ourselves if we do not have, we do not streamline the currency challenge that we are having. And of course, now I'm very excited about the new development happening in the continent of Africa in terms of trade among member countries, where we have the Pan-African payment system, which is part of the after kind of arrangement that indeed there must be a way where even if you don't have a single currency for the African continent, we should be able to trade among ourselves in local currencies, right? So that if I'm buying a goods and service from Nigeria, I don't have to change my Ghana cedi to the US dollar before I convert to the Naira. That I can trade between my counterpart partner in Nigeria in Naira, in Ghana cedis. I pay my goods in Ghana cedis in Ghana. My bank corresponds in Nigerian bank and pay the Naira equivalence in Nigeria, therefore reducing the pressure on the local currencies on the African continent. I mean, we cannot emphasize this enough. So I believe these are some of the things that we need to look at, that the currency situation must be resolved. We must understand that indeed we must bridge the currency gap. There's a lot of pressures on a lot of countries in the continent because of currency situation. In fact, Ghana, the mess that we are in, part of it is the depreciation of our cedi. The depreciation of our currency against the US dollar, because almost everything, as we see that the structure of the African continent, almost every country in the continent of Africa is import-driven economy. What it means that we import more than we export. And if we're importing more than you export, and you have to always find a foreign currency to import, then you're going to put unnecessary pressure on your currency. And that is the situation that most countries of the continent faces. So I believe that we cannot emphasize the relevance of the currency situation enough, that even whilst we wait to ensure that we can have a common currency, we must encourage at the political level, at the business level, we must set up rules and regulations to ensure that we can start trading among ourselves as a continent without relying on any foreign currency, that we should be able to trade among ourselves with our local currency. Of course, there are a lot of work that has to be done from the central bank level, where the central banks of respective countries must start building reserves of currencies on the continent, not just reserve of US dollars or euro or pounds, which has become a pain for most countries because they are suffering under the dominance of the US dollar in their economies. And therefore, we must encourage the fact that we must trade among ourselves using our own currency.
All right, let's flip the coin. We've been talking about Africa, what will be the benefit of the U.S. Africa Business Summit on the continent. But let's look at what the impact would be on the U.S. economy. And earlier you mentioned the competition between U.S. and China for Africa. So how will the summit impact that competition?
Geopolitically, I think it's going to be in the interest of the U.S. to take this kind of platform very seriously. Because in terms of trade numbers, in terms of investment numbers, they do not come near what the level of engagement that the African country has with China, which we all understand the kind of rivalry between US and China. We have US-China trade war still ongoing. They're trying their best to kind of calm things down, but we all know that there's still big elephants in the room when it comes to US and China's rivalry around the world. So for me, I believe that this platform is very significant for the US. They cannot take their eyes off Africa. They must see Africa as a place of doing business, a place of investing that you can get enormous returns, from the African continent, because if you are not, then other regions, other countries are actually actively investing in the continent. So it's very important for them significantly. And we all know that geopolitically, as you get deeper and closer, of course, you build your allies around the world. There are a lot of major global and international discussion that you need the support from different parts of the world. You want to ensure that you're on the right side of the continent of Africa. We are uniquely positioned to sway things, in ways that can change the course of our world as a continent because of the kind of position that we are finding ourselves in now. So I believe that the US understand this, understand where we are as a continent. They know the critical role that we can play in geopolitically in terms of taking decisions on major world issues. And therefore, they must use this as an opportunity to keep investing and do business in Africa. And again, We are not calling on them to throw their money away. We are calling on them to know that this is a place of doing business. And as you invest in Africa, you're going to get the returns that you need.
Time, shedding more light on the development at the U.S. African Business Summit and your projections on what African leaders should do to change the narrative in Africa. No doubt you're the right man for this kind of conversation. Thank you so much for your time and your submission.
Thank you for having me.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.